Seems like Jonathan Kuminga is actually voicing what we've all thought about Steve Kerr in his recent comments reported by Shams. Let's break this down and more right now. Listen, if you're new to the channel, this is P.kidd Talks NBA. We are going to get into this. Jonathan Kuminga, in so many words, pretty much said that he doesn't believe that Steve Kerr will allow him to reach his full potential. And you know what's funny? Although I am a Bulls fan, I'm Reptile Town blue through and through. I have a huge appreciation for the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, this is P.kidd Talks NBA. And this is the one thing I've said. I have not seen Steve Kerr do a good job developing the young talent on his roster. And I stood on that. And I still stand on that. And this only confirms that for me. I looked at Jonathan Kuminga and I said, there's potential there. He needs to develop it. He needs to find a way, like he was trying to find a way with Jordan Poole, to get into this lineup and be consistent. Now, there were games where Jonathan Kuminga did not show up. However, there were games where I'm like, this guy is the best athlete on the floor at this particular time. Why are they not allowing him to just be him? Why are they not giving him that more of opportunity? But that's also comes in conflict with Andrew Wiggins, because Andrew Wiggins was that for Golden State. And when you acquire Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga at the time would naturally go to the bench. And Andrew Wiggins played well. They got a ring out of it. It worked. It was a good situation for the Golden State Warriors. Now coming out of it with Andrew Wiggins not necessarily playing well, obviously everything that's happened with Draymond and stuff like that, Kuminga has been that one bright spot. But at times it seems as if Steve Kerr just rolls with his vets. And it's a risky move. I'll be honest with you. It was a risky move even in the last championship they won, because it was one of those games where I said him sticking with his vets is going to cost him this championship opportunity. And that's going to be the biggest talking point. And fortunately enough, they won. Steph was phenomenal. Draymond finally got it together. Andrew Wiggins was actually, playing some of the best defense I've seen anyone play on Jason Tatum. It worked when they had that opportunity against the Celtics. Jordan Poole had a game. He actually won them a game, one of those games in that series, if I'm not mistaken. If he doesn't have that outburst, it's curtains for the Warriors. So as of recent, I understand that. But you have to understand, they're not the current champs. The Denver Nuggets are. This is not, you can't live in that past. It's not and has not worked out. And ultimately, you have to decide, you have to move on. Realistically, you have to move on. And you have to start developing other players. You have to give them an opportunity. And I just wasn't seeing it. Now I know there is a system. Steph Curry is not he's a system. Like James Harden says that he's a system. Steph Curry is a system. And you have to find a way to work within that system. But what I've seen of Steph Curry as of late is it's less about the system and more about, hey, somebody else needs to step up on a consistent basis to give him help. He can rebound. He can shoot. He can defend at a high level. Yes, he's younger, but he's been there long enough to understand you have to just let this boy run. And I don't say boy demeaningly. Forgive me. Like, you have to give him those opportunities. So this is something that a lot of fans have seen for a while. We're not saying anything new. We're just, it's now finally being confirmed by someone actually in the situation. And while you probably will never hear anything come from Steph, Clay, I don't know what Draymond is doing nowadays. While you may not hear anything from those particular players, the vets on the team, people who have seen the ups and downs and the struggles of the Golden State Warriors, people who actually want them to be successful, who actually want to see Steph reach his max potential as a Hall of Fame player and potential great, all-time great, people really want them to actually do well, can see some of the deficiencies. And a lot of it comes down to how Steve Kerr sticks with or pretty much plays his roster. Sometimes it just simply doesn't make sense. And it's also called into question whether or not Steve Kerr is really the coach we think he is. Or did he already inherit a really good situation that only got better with Kevin Durant and actually got better when they actually made some and actually stayed consistent when they actually retooled that package, and he just had the best backcourt and players available? Is he not what we think. I mean, we could sit there and say he's Phil Jackson, but I think Phil Jackson did it with two different sets of personalities, but actually able to find ways to help other people come along in ways that I have not seen Steve Kerr do. I think the Jordan Poole thing, and I think the Jordan Poole situation is an anomaly in that system, because how many other players have developed well in his system? How many other players, like realistic, Klay Thompson should not have been a starter as long as he was a starter. There was a time when Klay Thompson absolutely should have been coming off the bench. That's not egregious to say. He's not the same player, but he gave you his all. He won rings after it. He's built a legacy. He's a Hall of freaking Famer. He's one of the greatest shooters of all time, and he can still continue that by taking a more Ray Allen approach. But for some odd reason, Steve Kerr keeps him in these prominent roles, whereas he's not able to impact the game the same way anymore. And it was because he was able to impact the game in other ways than his shooting that it actually made excuses for when he would take bad shots. It's easy to make excuses for somebody who is who's taking these heaves that don't make sense, even though he's probably one of 3 or 4 people in the league who can do it. When he's a lockdown defender, he's able to do things he's able to do all the little things that unfortunately his body is not going to allow him to keep up at a high pace. He's not Steph Curry, but Steph Curry couldn't even do some of the stuff that Klay was asked to do, especially from a defensive standpoint. In fact, if Steph could sit there and be a defensive clamp like Klay was, they probably have more rings and not have won and not have had Kyrie bust his tail at the 3-point line for that shot. That's just being real. So Klay, the moment has passed, and Steve Kerr has not allowed or not found a way to transition him into his next role, which is how do we find a way to just make him a nice spot up shooter and extend the rest of his career and allow these other people to come along. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say he hasn't tried, but you have to understand it hasn't been consistent. And when you don't have that consistency, you ruin younger players because now you're making adjustments on the fly that they don't really understand. And one of the best things about being a coach is it's not the fact that you sat him. Mike Brown has this moment with, I think, Malik, where he apologized because he didn't coach him well. And I love that clip with Mike Brown because he said, I'm not apologizing for sitting you. I'm apologizing because I didn't coach you. You didn't understand why. Steve Kerr isn't breaking down the why for his young player. And if it's happening with Jonathan Kuminga, it has to have happened with others. And so it makes you question whether or not he is absolutely being the coach we think he is, or is it just getting away from him way too fast? Now, here's the thing. This moment, them being mid, potentially mid, them being bad, was eventually going to happen regardless of what we say. It's happened to every great team that's had a run. The Warriors have had an improbable run. They really have. And you have to take your hats off to them. They got 4 of them things out of it. It is an improbable run. It's only happened a handful of times in the history of basketball. Now, dynasties have always been a thing, but the way that they've done it, the way they've stayed relevant. I mean, at one point, they had moments where they sucked. They had a really, really bad season. They bounced back from that. So the way that their journey has taken shape over this past 10 years, very improbable. Excuse me. Doesn't happen. You have to respect it. Steve Kerr is definitely worthy of all the praise and adulation that comes with what they've accomplished. He's earned that. But now he's in a different space. And now we're going to really see who he is as a coach as they move forward, because the Klay, Steph, Draymond era is coming to a close, whether you like it or not. And he has to get with it. And what he does with developing young talent is going to make all the difference in how Steph's career ends, if he ends up just staying with Golden State. And I don't think Golden State will ever let him leave. I think he's going to be there. I think Klay is going to be there. Draymond, I think that ship has sailed on Draymond. I think that they're going to look at other things there. But it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be really nice. They have the opportunity to replicate, hear me out, what the Spurs did. Spurs made a nice run. Tim Duncan made a nice run in the 2000s. Ran into a buzzsaw, Kobe Bryant. But they made a nice run in the early 2000s. But they still won one in the 2010s. They still got it done. They still got back to the finals. Twice. Older team. Old Tim Duncan. Older Ginobili. They did make that. There's still time for at least some of this core to do that. But you know what happened? He developed a young player, Pop did, in Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi came along as freak of nature. And they were able to extend it and get another one. That is very possible. And that would end up being Tim Duncan's fifth. That is very possible here in Golden State. So the story's not done. But for right now, they're in hot water. But I want to hear your thoughts, man. Whether it's love, whether it's hate, I want to hear whether or not you feel Steve Kerr has done a good job with developing his young talent, specifically Jonathan Kuminga, who I've been on the record several times saying he hasn't done a good job. I want to see what the future looks like because this team is not going to be the same. They can't be. They have too many things that's pointing to them having to kind of retool, rebuild, and things of that nature. And ultimately, hopefully that doesn't mean that Steph leaves, but that may have to be a possibility if they're going to do it the right way from an organizational standpoint. I mean, you have to kind of do what you have to do. But at the end of the day, it starts with Steve Kerr being able to actually do it. Is he still the coach for them? Let's talk about it in the chat, in the comments. I'll be in there with you. Till next time. Peace.